And right now, though, let's get into a conversation with Zolani Mkiva. The world today is marking International Mandela Day, which would mark Madiba's 103rd birthday. For more on the importance of this day, we're joined now by Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, General Secretary, poet and praise poet, Zolani Mkiva. Zolani, good evening, and thank you very much for your time.
Ndiyabulisa mfoka Mdluli, ndibulise nakubaphulaphuli beNewzroom Afrika. Good evening on this International Nelson Mandela Day, which is a very important landmark in the calendar of the whole globe. And for us as South Africans, we are humbled that the father of our democracy has been honored not only by the United Nations, but by all the nations of the world as a key figure who is an embodiment of freedom, peace, justice, equality, as well as social cohesion for human beings all across the world.
Right. You have now
Thank you for having me.
Huge responsibility of being a praise singer for Madiba while he was alive, but even today, I suppose you're still continuing with that task. But let's talk a little bit about the Madiba that you were saluting in the 90s when he was still in jail. Many people don't realize that you became a praise singer even before he came out of jail, and you were saluting this man. Your definition of the Madiba you were saluting then and in 2021, how vastly different is that definition?
Well, prior to Madiba being released from jail, you will recall that his name, Nelson Mandela, was a name that was a clarion call, actually, on all the South Africans and Africans. It was a rallying name which was calling all of us to work together for the realization of the emancipation of South Africa, which at that stage was the last country which had not realized its independence from coloniality. So I never saw Nelson Mandela at that time. I didn't have a picture of his face, but I had an imagination of this giant, this gallant fighter who represented the struggle for freedom and justice in South Africa. And my compositions of renditions and recitals were informed by the spirit that he represented, a freedom fighter, the spirit that he represented, that he wanted to do all he can for South Africans from all walks of life to realize what is a human right, what is the right to freedom, to elect leaders of their own, their right to live in harmony and peace, and their right to have access to justice and equality before the law. So my compositions were really about that. They were about the annunciation and the consolidation of the struggle against a crime, against humanity, which was apartheid. We were young at that time. But at a time when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, it was a singular honor and a privilege on my part to be given that particular responsibility of ushering him in every time he was to address the masses of the people of his country, singing his praises, but also highlighting his experience, his sacrifices, and his responsibility as a towering leader who led from the front, even though he was jailed. The messages that he issued via the comrades and messages that he issued via the letters that he had written to his children so that they can pronounce to the nation, they were inspiration to me to write those poetic accounts in saluting him. So we were so humbled that here comes a man who had spent 27 years out of jail, but he was prepared to forgive his enemies and wanted to hold the hands with the enemies to say that we are not going to chase you into the sea and call upon you to go back to Europe, but rather we will embrace you as long as you commit to the political will of working towards the consolidation of South Africa into becoming a harmonious state where we can all live together above the surface and have equal opportunities as a new country. That's the Mandela who fought so hard and saved us from an unprecedented civil war at that time. He realized that there was only one way for us to make it into the future, is to work together, to negotiate, and to reconcile. and therefore we can chart a way forward for a brighter future with prosperity for our people.
Important themes that you're raising there. I want to touch on them when we continue in a moment, particularly a man who saved the country from an unprecedented civil war that we could have faced in the country. In this moment of an unrest, I suppose there are some key lessons that we need to pull from there that can certainly help us pull forward. Poet and praise poet Contralesa General Secretary Zolani Mkiva stays with us. In Focus continues in a moment. Conversation with a man who performed a rather pivotal role in many of the pivotal moments of Madiba's life. That's praise poet and Contralesa General Secretary Zolani Mkiva, who's with us tonight here on In Focus. Before the break, you mentioned one of the traits of a man who leads from the front. Now, this is a concept that can be easily misunderstood. What does it really mean, Zolani, in a time of crisis to lead from the front? What did you learn in observing Madiba during a time as he was a leader and I suppose a towering figure in this country?
Nelson Mandela realized that he needed to put his emotion away when dealing with the situation of South Africa, because we were a fragmented society. Remember, one of the key features of the apartheid policy was separate development, where our people were divided along cultural lines and in some instances along tribal lines. And Nelson Mandela wanted to capitalize on the commonalities of us as South Africans. Those commonalities draw their source from our experience, the historical experience, the fundamental way in which the apartheid state had ruined our lives, particularly as the African majority. But he realized that in order for us to have a way forward, he needed to unite us as a people, to capitalize on the key fundamentals of founding a new nation. Those included that we must have, all of us have equal rights insofar as one man, one vote, number one. Number two, that we must all have equal opportunities in South Africa. And his ability to neutralize the figures of the apartheid state to the extent that they accepted the conditions that were placed before them, that there is no other way. It's for them to open up for the greater South Africans to be part and parcel of this country, because in any case, this country belongs to them, because it was their ancestors who founded this country. And therefore, I will always salute him and we will always remember him in that fashion. Of course, there were issues that relate to land, the economy and the wealth, which remained squarely in the hands of the white South Africans. And Nelson Mandela reached out to them and informed them that they will never have a peaceful sleep without them opening up the economy for the majority of South Africans also to have a meaningful role in terms of the management of the national question, but also the access to resources, access to the economy, the mainstream economy in particular. And in the first 5 years, which were the only years that Madiba served as the president, he created a good foundation for us to build on. But what had happened after those years, I don't think we had moved at a pace and at a speed wherein we had to secure a meaningful role for the majority of South Africans in the economic space. I think the BEE policy and the broad-based BEE policy, all of them did not do the wonder that Nelson Mandela had created. And I think that's one of the challenges that we need to work on, given the recent eruptions which we have had in the country. They point to issues of inequality in the main, issues of poverty, and issues of unemployment, as the president has said as well in his delivery today. If we do not address that, I think that is the main feature and the main causality of what is creating the eruptions in the country. And unless we deal with those as urgently as possible, I think this whole fever of what has happened can easily repeat itself in the nearest future.
The other theme that you touched on, Zolani, is the theme of rule of law. And let's talk about that, because it's something that is quite topical at this particular point with all the the cases that are going on, particularly which have got to do with the leadership of the African National Congress, a movement that Madiba was a part of. Key amongst those, of course, are the issues that are facing the former president. The leadership of this movement, have they effectively engaged with this process of rule of law at all levels and thoroughly engaged with it, or are they somewhat disengaged with the details of what it actually means? And therefore, maybe we do need to have a meaningful conversation and a revisit of that conversation and ask some critical questions of our leadership.
Well, you are tapping a very important question there, Thabo Mdluli. You know, the rule of law, I think it finds its roots in our context from the access of justice. In South Africa, do we really have justice? My answer would say we do not really have justice. What we have is freedom without justice. What we have in this country is a legal system, and we need to address that because it will affect the rule of law which is expected and anticipated by society. Let's start there and build justice for all, where we are all literally equal before the law. Currently, the majority of our people, in order to access justice in this country, they have to pay exorbitant funds to lawyers and advocates, which they cannot afford anyway. And therefore, the legal framework favors those with resources. That does not make that a justice system. It simply makes it a legal system. We cannot afford. That's why in some instances, other people see retribution instead of restorative justice. I think you are correct, therefore, that we should call upon our leaders to allow our people to have a discourse where we can discuss the issues that are related to access to justice, equality for all, as well as the rule of law. That national discussion is actually required, and it is urgent for us to address that as soon as possible. Otherwise, it becomes very unfair to the poor people that they must go and raise resources and they do not know where to start off in order for them to access that justice by employing lawyers and advocates. It can't be. We have to come up with a more Afrocentric approach to these issues, and the laws of the country must also have a sense of being embedded in the cultural outlook of ours as the native, in particular the majority of people. We cannot afford to be suffocated only by Roman Dutch laws and English common laws. We must find a way of mainstreaming the African laws which are about restorative justice system. Otherwise, we will again reverse the gains that we have already consolidated 27 years into our democracy. So I agree with you fully. We need that conversation.
Have a look at some of the images of Zolani Mkiva at the Welcome Home rally in Transkei in the 90s, and you look at the Zolani Mkiva today, completely different images that you're talking about. But also, I suppose, in your thinking, those were the formative stages of our democracy, maybe also the formative stages of Zolani Mkiva and the kind of thinking that you have today. How has that progressed, and how has Madiba influenced that thinking in as far as what a leader should be?
Well, Madiba has influenced me through his approach into politics and through his approach into nationness and patriotism. I think he has instilled in all of us that spirit of patriotism, and that's why I think we also need that kind of public education where we can actually conscientize our people to love their country beyond the differences that we may have ideologically and otherwise. Otherwise, if we don't have that spirit of patriotism, we'll continue with the trajectory of wanting to vandalize even national assets, which is against the spirit of nationness. So I learned a lot from Madiba. Of course, when I was young, I did not have the grasp of the main issues that relate to the issues of the politics and how to manage issues that are related to the national question. But now, because that was 35 years ago, I was still 15 years. 35 years later, I'm where I'm at, and I understand better the issues. And the lessons that I learned from Madiba are the ones that make me to be able to make the contribution, whether from a point of view of the discussions that we have at a level of Contralesa and also our engagement with the ruling party. We continue to advise the ruling party on how they should work together, on how we must caution them to do away with factionalism. Because if they are factionalized as the NEC of the ANC, that factionalism, it actually goes out into the entire society. You find churches factionalized, you find people at a local level factionalized, and it creates a conundrum for the whole nation. The unity of the ANC, that the leadership of the ANC, if it were to sing from the same hymn sheet, it would make it easy for us to progress on a number of things. Otherwise, if they are factionalized, they find themselves having petty squabbles where they fight over issues that do not have anything to do with the national question as well as the national democratic revolution. So we need to make that call, that the unity of purpose is very key on the part of the leadership of the ANC as the governing party in this country to really tackle the land question so that all our people have got access, meaningful access to land, but also to deal with the backlog that we have into the access to the economy and the wealth of the country. Let's have a fair share as the natives of this country. It can't be right that those who conquered us remain, with their hands in the gear of the economy. That is not correct. It's a recipe for disaster. We need to deal. It may be that what we have seen recently is a tip of an iceberg. Unless we do something about it, then it will be another ticking time bomb, and we could have other explosions in the near future. I think leadership needs to take a center stage on this because it's an issue of leadership. There should be leadership visibility, and leaders must have a political will to touch the issues that resonate with the masses of the people and address those issues of poverty, unemployment, and inequality as urgently as possible. Let us stop creating more policies. We've got enough policies above the surface. All we need to do is to implement those policies, and these policies are living documents. All we need to do is to improve on them and ensure that our people get what they expect to get. And we are a highly politicized society. We are a highly politically aware society, and therefore people know their rights. Our leaders must just do the right thing and lead us into the right direction and unite behind those good policies.
Praise poet and Contralesa General Secretary Zolani Mkiva, appreciate your time, sir, and thank you very much for joining us tonight here on In Focus to reflect on the life of Madiba. When we continue next,